3 police cruisers arrived within minutes, their own sirens adding to the cacophony that was driving Karen to new heights of righteous indignation. Officer Martinez approached her vehicle while his partners worked to clear a path for the ambulance around Karen's BMW. "Mrs. Whitmore, I need you to move your vehicle immediately," Officer Martinez said, his voice carrying the weight of authority mixed with barely contained frustration. Karen remained seated, her hands gripping the steering wheel. "Officer Martinez, I'm exercising my rights as a tax-paying citizen to enforce community standards. These emergency vehicles have been." "Ma'am, you're currently charged with obstructing emergency services, reckless endangerment, and potentially vehicular manslaughter if that patient doesn't make it." His words hit like ice water, but Karen's resolve only hardened. "Vehicular manslaughter? I haven't moved my car an inch. I'm parked, Officer Martinez. Perfectly legally parked. In the middle of a public highway, blocking emergency medical services." He leaned closer to her window. "Mrs. Whitmore, I've known you for 5 years. You're not a bad person. But right now, you're making the worst decision of your life." For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Karen's face. Through her rearview mirror, she could see the ambulance finally maneuvering around her vehicle, its path cleared by the police cars. The sirens grew fainter as it disappeared around the bend toward Mercy General Hospital. "There," she said, straightening her shoulders. "Problem solved. They got through eventually." "Eventually isn't good enough when someone's dying," Officer Martinez replied. "Step out of the vehicle, please." The crowd of neighbors had swelled to nearly 30 people. Karen could see them pointing, some recording with their phones. Mrs. Chen was shaking her head in disgust. The Johnsons were arguing quietly, gesturing toward her car. Even her most reliable ally, Patricia Summers from the HOA board, was staring at her with something that looked suspiciously like horror. "This is ridiculous," Karen said as she finally opened her car door. "I was protecting our community. Someone has to stand up for our rights." "By blocking an ambulance," Patricia called out, her voice shaking. "Karen, what were you thinking?" "I was thinking about Section 4.7 of our community guidelines." Karen shot back, her voice rising. "I was thinking about property values and quality of life. I was thinking about all the things the rest of you are too cowardly to defend." The handcuffs felt cold against Karen's wrists. She'd never been arrested before, had never even received a speeding ticket. The metal bit into her skin as Officer Martinez recited her rights, his voice professional but tinged with disappointment. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the words washed over her, Karen looked out at her neighbors' faces. The expressions ranged from shock to disgust to something that might have been pity. These were people she'd lived beside for 15 years. People whose lawns she'd measured for code violations, whose garbage cans she'd photographed when placed incorrectly, whose children she'd lectured about bicycle safety. "I was protecting you," she called out as Officer Martinez guided her toward the police car. "All of you. This neighborhood, our standards, our way of life." But the crowd was already dispersing, neighbors shaking their heads as they returned to their homes. Only Patricia remained, standing by the sidewalk with her arms wrapped around herself, staring at the spot where Karen's BMW had blocked the highway. As the police car pulled away, Karen pressed her face to the window, watching Meadowbrook Heights disappear behind her. For the first time in years, she felt truly alone. The community she'd spent so long trying to protect seemed to be rejecting her, and she couldn't understand why they couldn't see what she'd been trying to do. The radio crackled in the front seat. "Unit 47, be advised. Patient from the Meadowbrook incident has been stabilized at Mercy General. Touch and go, but they made it." Karen closed her eyes, unsure whether she felt relief or vindication. Karen Whitmore's pristine white BMW sat sideways across both lanes of Meadowbrook Highway, her hazard lights blinking like a deranged Christmas tree. Behind her, an ambulance's sirens wailed in desperation, but Karen remained planted in her driver's seat, arms crossed, jaw set with the determination of someone who'd spent 15 years perfecting the art of neighborhood tyranny. "Ma'am, you need to move your vehicle immediately," The paramedic's voice crackled through her window as he jogged up to her car, his face flushed with urgency and disbelief. Karen rolled down her window precisely 3 inches. I don't think so. This is a residential area, and your excessive noise is violating our community's peace ordinance. Section 4.7 clearly states, Lady, we've got a heart attack victim in there. The paramedic's voice pitched higher. Every second counts. Then perhaps you should have thought about that before disturbing our quiet morning. Karen's voice carried the same tone she used when lecturing neighbors about trash can placement. I've filed 17 noise complaints against emergency vehicles this month alone. Someone needs to take a stand. The paramedic stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. Are you seriously blocking an ambulance right now? I'm enforcing community standards. Karen replied coolly, adjusting her rearview mirror to check her lipstick. This neighborhood has rules for a reason. Behind them, the ambulance's sirens grew more frantic. Karen could see the EMT in the passenger seat frantically radioing for backup, his hands gesturing wildly. A small crowd of residents had begun gathering on the sidewalk, their morning routines forgotten as they witnessed the surreal standoff. Karen, Mrs. Henderson from 42 Maple Street called out. What in God's name are you doing? Karen lowered her window further, projecting her voice with the authority of someone who chaired the Homeowners Association for a decade. I'm protecting our property values. Do you know what constant emergency vehicle noise does to real estate prices? I have charts. There's someone dying in that ambulance, shouted Mr. Peterson, still in his bathrobe. That's not my problem, Karen snapped back. My problem is maintaining the standards that make Meadowbrook Heights the premier residential community in the county. If we don't enforce the rules, we become just another common suburb. The paramedic was now on his radio, his voice urgent but professional. We need police backup on Meadowbrook Highway. We have a civilian blocking emergency response. Patient is critical. Karen's satisfaction was evident in her posture. Finally, someone was taking her complaints seriously. She'd been fighting this battle for months. The constant disruption of police cars, fire trucks, and ambulances treating their peaceful neighborhood like a thoroughfare. The HOA board had been too weak to act, but Karen Whitmore wasn't weak. She was resolved. Ma'am, please. The paramedic tried once more, his voice breaking slightly. We can discuss your concerns later, but right now, someone's life hangs in the balance. Karen looked at him through her partially opened window, her expression unchanging. Rules are rules, she said simply, then rolled the window back up. The sirens continued to wail behind her, but Karen sat perfectly still, watching the growing crowd of neighbors, noting each face for her mental catalogue of future HOA violations. The holding cell at the county jail was nothing like the orderly, rule-governed world Karen had spent decades creating. The fluorescent lights hummed with an irregular buzz that made her eye twitch, and the smell of industrial disinfectant, mixed with something she didn't want to identify, made her stomach turn. Your bail hearing is in 2 hours, the guard informed her, his tone neither kind nor cruel, simply indifferent. Your lawyer's here to see you. Karen smoothed her wrinkled blouse and tried to maintain her dignity as she was led to the consultation room. David Chen, Mrs. Chen's son, she realized with a start, sat waiting with a briefcase and an expression she couldn't quite read. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, standing as she entered. I'm David Chen from Morrison, Bach and Associates. The HOA board retained me to represent you. The board? Karen felt a flicker of hope. So they understand what I was trying to do. David's expression remained neutral. They understand you're facing serious charges that could reflect poorly on the entire community. The obstruction charge alone carries up to 3 years in prison. The words hit Karen like a physical blow. 3 years. She sank into the plastic chair across from him, her hands trembling slightly. But I was protecting the community. The noise ordinances. Mrs. Whitmore, I need you to understand something. David opened his briefcase and pulled out a tablet. This is the emergency dispatch log from this morning. The call was for Harold Peterson, Mr. Peterson from Maple Street. His wife found him collapsed in their kitchen at 7:23 am. Massive heart attack. Karen's face went pale. She knew Harold Peterson, had written him up twice for letting his hedges grow half an inch too tall, had argued with him about his grandson's bicycle being left on the front lawn. The average response time for this type of emergency is 8 minutes, David continued. Your blockade delayed the ambulance by 14 additional minutes. Mr. Peterson flatlined twice during transport. But he's alive, Karen whispered. The radio said he was stabilized. He's alive, but he suffered significant cardiac damage. The doctors say if they'd reached him even 5 minutes sooner, his prognosis would be completely different. As it stands, he'll need a heart transplant to survive the next 2 years. The room felt like it was spinning. Karen gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. I didn't know. I thought it was just another noise complaint. They come through here all the time, disturbing everyone. Mrs. Whitmore, David interrupted gently. That's not a legal defense. Intent matters, but impact matters more. Karen stared at the table, her mind racing. Harold Peterson, the man who'd always waved at her during his evening walks, even after the hedge disputes. The man whose wife made those Christmas cookies she secretly looked forward to each year, though she'd never admitted it. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely audible. The district attorney is considering multiple charges. The media has picked up the story. HOA Karen blocks ambulance is trending on social media. There's already a petition calling for your removal from the HOA board, and it has over 10,000 signatures. Karen looked up sharply. Removal? But I've served this community for 15 years. I've dedicated my life to maintaining standards, to preserving property values. Mrs. Whitmore, David said, his voice taking on a tone she'd never heard before. Not quite pity, but something close to it. The community you thought you were protecting is the same community that's now calling for your prosecution. The standards you fought so hard to maintain. They never included blocking emergency services. For the first time in decades, Karen Whitmore had no response. No regulation to cite, no violation to report, no rule to enforce. She sat in the sterile consultation room, surrounded by the consequences of her absolute certainty, finally understanding that her 15-year reign as neighborhood watchdog had ended not with vindication, but with the realization that she might have become the very thing she'd spent so long fighting against, a threat to her community's well-being. David closed his briefcase and stood. I'll do my best to negotiate a plea deal, but Mrs. Whitmore, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that your life as you've known it is over. As he left, Karen remained seated, staring at her reflection in the table's surface. For the first time in years, she wondered if she'd been wrong about everything, and more terrifyingly, she wondered if it was too late to find out who she might have been if she'd spent 15 years trying to help her community instead of controlling it. Outside, the world continued without her, and somewhere in a hospital room, Harold Peterson fought for his life while his wife held his hand and wondered why their neighbor had valued quiet mornings more than human life.